Hi guys, so in a worrying development, the government have changed the rules regarding people who are vulnerable or people who have been shielded over the last number of weeks. These people have been asked to remain inside, not to go out, not to mix with members of the public for their own good. Now the government have decided to change that, and let's hear what one of them had to say.
This weekend, we've seen lockdown measures really drawn back, really eased, and suddenly the streets are flooded. There are people everywhere. And for me to go outside, I would not be able to maintain that 2 meter distance. I'm a wheelchair user, and so I have another example of how difficult that is to maintain that social distance.
It was an announcement that took many by surprise. Those who have been shielding since March because of their health had not expected to be able to go out until the end of this month. Now in England and Wales only, that has changed. Today, this question was asked at the Downing Street press conference.
The shielding advice was updated on the 29th of May. It did not indicate it was safe for those who are clinically extremely vulnerable to go outside. What changed on the 30th of May to make it safe? One of the reasons that we could make that change is that the rate of incidence of disease is now back down to the levels that it was before we introduced the shielding policy.
Although,
of course, the number of cases are down because you introduced the shielding policy. That's like if I'm holding up a physical shield, if I'm standing in a field and people are shooting arrows at me, and I put up and I'm given a shield and I hold it up and I don't get hit by arrows, it's thanks to the shield. As soon as I take down the shield again, I'm going to get hit by arrows. Now, what you would want is to reduce the number of arrows flying in the air. But the government are not interested in reducing it sufficiently for people to lower that shield.
although the R number or transmission rate that Mr. Hancock referred to there has been at the same level for more than 2 weeks, so it still remains unclear why the advice suddenly changed. Certainly local councils who have to ensure those shielding are cared for were not told until late last night, or in some cases this morning.
This is just another example of the lack of information, lack of cooperation between the government and the local councils. The councils are the ones who have to provide services for people, for example, disabled people in their areas. And the government changing the rules at the last minute, and the councils finding out that night or the next day. This is ridiculous. It's extremely dangerous.
The guidance was published late last night and it landed in my desk this morning as to what the current advice for those on the shielded list is, and government trying to balance the keeping people safe and protecting them from what for them could be a very, very nasty illness, but also shielding itself carries consequences. I know people who are shielding, they're just depressed because they feel that they're locked up in their house. So balancing those two things is really very difficult.
It's understandable that people want to get out. And look, people seem to think on this channel that I just want a permanent lockdown. I don't want that. What I want is for the numbers to decline sufficiently that we can return to some form of normality. I've said before that we're not going to return to the normality we had before this virus appeared. But we have to create a new normality. We have to create a new normality for everyone. We need to include the elderly, we need to include disabled people, we need to include everyone. Everyone should have the best quality of life they can possibly have. But for the time being, we need to reduce the number. The government are not interested now. They've demonstrated that. They're talking about ending the lockdown. They have eased it on Monday. At a time where the number of new cases is still extremely high. It's over 1,500 new cases. That's way too high. To give you a comparison, here in Italy, the number of new cases is between 300 and 400. And we're still easing the lockdown. We're still under a certain level of lockdown. So the UK is ending the lockdown much too soon. And this haphazard way of releasing information to vulnerable people is extremely dangerous. Now, I don't want to go down a dark road here and say that this is intentional. This is an attempt to get rid of people that the Conservative Party don't care about. I hope that's not the case. I really do. But why are they doing it at this stage? Why are they not doing it at a later stage where they feel the numbers have reduced significantly, the new cases have reduced significantly, and provide councils with information in advance so that they can prepare properly?
And a tweet from Dr. Nikita Kanani, Director of Primary Care at NHS England, revealed she had not been warned about the announcement. As soon as I know more, she tweeted, I will post on this thread. In the meantime, please continue to follow the guidance set out. Just under half of England's trusts have reported no deaths in the past 48 hours, although the number of infections is about 8,000 a day, which is still high. The government's much vaunted test and trace system was supposed to be up and running by today to go alongside the eased lockdown measures. It's thought the tests will be analysed at the government's lighthouse laboratories, separate from the NHS testing facilities.
Why? Why are you having a separate body carrying out the analysis? Once again, is this another attempt to show how private enterprise is able to do the job of the NHS, so that later on this can be rolled out as an example of why the NHS needs to be sold off, why the Tories are able to present that, look, we need to go private, we need to emulate what the United States has?
There are some anecdotal and some evidence to suggest that the turnaround times in the Lighthouse labs is not what it could be, and certainly not as good as it is within the NHS labs. And secondly, the IT links from the Lighthouse labs into the NHS systems is certainly not as good as in NHS systems.
So once again, why is the government doing this? Is it an attempt to softly push the privatization of the NHS?
And how you get that result to public health to allow them to do the contact tracing, I think is still not clear.
Also not clear, or not answered by the government, was how the test and trace system is working so far, how many cases have been dealt with, how many contacts have been traced, and how many people have been quarantined. Well, yes, the government is very...
So, of course they're not going to say it, because it's not about transparency. They don't care about providing clear information to the public or to the media. Everything is hidden behind slogans and messages and walls of silence. Yes, we're doing what we can, or we have greatly increased the numbers, or we have greatly reduced the infections. Everything is opaque. Why? Because they want to defend the government. They are afraid of providing clear information. They're afraid of allowing the scientists to speak freely to the public, to the media, because they will expose the real damage and how the government have been dealing with these situations in such a haphazard way. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. But I'd definitely like to hear from people who are in vulnerable groups. How are you dealing with the easing of this lockdown? Are you able to go out? How are you able to manage with social distancing? I'd really like to hear your stories. Let me know in the comments. As always, they're greatly appreciated. Thanks. Why not become a Patreon and enjoy access to our Discord server, where we share news, chat, and have some fun. If you become a patron, you can also make video suggestions on topics that are important to you. Check it out via the link in the description.